My experience: child-free but birthed the baby. When I was 16, I was having intimacy, and though I used protection, it broke condoms. I was young and my periods were very irregular. Eventually, I discovered I was pregnant. I had nobody to turn to. To make things worse, the guy I was dating turned out to be a massive liar. I will elaborate more later. He got arrested one night for violating probation. He had a gun on him. I was unaware of this part of his life, which was selling drugs. I had been kicked out and lived in a small conservative town and did not have the resources that are more available these days. Every place I called was not an abortion clinic. They deceptively named themselves things that sounded like clinics, but all under the guise to encourage you to keep the child. These people, knowing I was a homeless teen, were encouraging me to have a baby. So sick. Finally, time was up and I was unable to get an abortion. Even if I had the money, the fetus was too old for the procedure. I hid my pregnancy. During this time, my family and I made up and I moved back home. I had a job that kept me out of the house from 2 to midnight 5 days a week. And on my days off, I avoided my family. GNCOs and baggy clothes were in style, and that helped me hide my growing belly. Basically, nobody except my jailed ex knew I was pregnant. Then it happened. I got my first labor pain. I was scared and in denial. I had read about girls having babies at home and taking them to adoption agencies. This was my quote-unquote plan. But then as the contractions got worse, I knew it would be impossible. It was my day off. My contractions started the night before after I was locked out, got off work at midnight, got home at 12:30 and no keys, and climbed through a basement window in labor and seriously pregnant. At any rate, the next day I had been in bed all morning, screaming into pillows due to the pain, waiting for my family to leave. My plan was to call an ambulance as soon as they left. Then my dad decided at the last moment he was not going with the rest of the family, so my plan was foiled. I did not have a car or even a driver's license for that matter. So now, laying in bed, panicking as my contractions were getting worse and worse, my dad bursts into my room to yell about me being lazy on my day off of work. He could immediately tell something was wrong. He laid on my bed and asked me what was going on. I told him I was pregnant. He then said, "It's okay, honey, you can get an abortion." Then I pulled the blankets down and exposed my huge belly and said, "I'm going into labor now." His face showed the shock. He told me to get in his truck. It was brand new, and he actually said to me, "Don't let your water break in my new truck." LOL, as if I could control that. He dropped me off at the front door of the hospital and said, "Don't bring that baby home with you," and drove off. I was totally alone and had no idea what to expect. For what it's worth, I had already decided I was not going to keep this baby. My dad's quote-unquote demand had nothing to do with my choice. A few hours later, the baby was born and taken away. As I stated, I wanted to put the baby up for adoption during the delivery. A week later, a woman from the adoption agency brought me several packets of parents to choose from. My ex was also alerted about the situation and tried to say he wanted to keep the baby. Mind you, he was in jail. On top of that, the woman from the agency explained how hard it was to locate my ex. He had told his name was Scott and he was 22. The truth was his name was Lawrence, names changed for this post, and he was 35. He had a daughter a year older than I was at this time. I explained I was not interested in raising this baby and had to deal with the shock of being lied to and the hormones and feelings from this traumatic experience. For a teen, this was all so much. After the agency explained to quote-unquote Scott that I would not be a part of this child's life and his being in jail meant his parents would have to care for the child, he finally signed the papers. There was also talk of statutory rape, which I believe put the nail in the coffin. The family I picked were ecstatic. I was on a muted line when the agency called to hear the happiness and excitement in their voices. Well, a fair amount of my stress and grief was wiped away. Now, 25 years later, when I get the "you'll want one day," or my personal favorite, "you'll never get to experience the joy of giving birth," I just plainly explain that 1, I have experienced childbirth and it was not as quote-unquote amazing as they claim. They usually get quiet and apologized. And 2, you shouldn't assume why a person has made the decision, because there are many reasons why a woman does not want to or cannot have a baby. I do not keep this a secret. It's part of my life and part of me. I've had an abortion and that was significantly less awful than childbirth. Since then, I've helped 2 cousins, 1 sister, and a handful of friends with funds to get an abortion. Basically, anyone who knows me knows I will help with the funds, no questions asked, and no pressure in paying me back. My experience was so awful on so many levels and I'd never want anyone to have a baby, because they couldn't afford an abortion. How wild is that? A person who cannot afford an abortion is expected to be able to afford raising a child? Anyway, that's my story. I've wanted to share it for a while now. Thanks for reading. I wanted to post this for a while, and now that I feel better. Added some words. That was crazy. Thank you for sharing. I've never understood why people think it's okay to say things like, "You'll never get to experience the joy of being a parent or giving birth," because they never know what that person has actually been through. In your case, you're willing to share, but what if that wasn't the case? What if all that happened because of being attacked? What if you wanted the baby and it was a stillborn? People really need to learn boundaries. Exactly. Sometimes, depending on my mood, I don't even explain the adoption part, which definitely stops them in their tracks. Like, well, not that it's any of your business, but I have given birth and it's very rude for you to assume anything about my life. If they press, I sometimes just say, "The baby's no longer with me," which is true, but can sound a lot worse than the reality. And more to your point, my close friend has had 2 stillborns, and once a coworker who did not know about this was basically saying it was pointless for her to be married if she wasn't going to make babies. I'm just glad I wasn't there when this exchange happened, because it broke my heart to see my friend burst into tears and try to explain. I stopped her and said it wasn't that woman's business. You could tell she knew she was out of line. I still get angry recalling that day. You sound like a wonderful friend and a very kind human being. I really try, you know? I never feel okay with knowing I could have helped someone, even if it inconvenienced me temporarily, money-wise, and didn't. Especially my cousin. She was just starting her career and accidents happen. Now she's quite successful, and I really don't think that would have been the case otherwise. I'm so sorry you went through that. No one should be forced to go through something like that when they're no older than children themselves. To all the clinics disguised as quote-unquote abortion clinics, but encouraged you to give birth, I hope karma gets them. These butt faces should be thrown in jail. Also, I'm so glad you're helping all these women access abortion safely. Yeah, I had called so many deceptive places that I actually gave up. I felt so alone and like I had no control over my own body or life. Those places really should not be allowed to exist. One place actually harassed me several times by calling to see if I've quote-unquote come around. None of them had any resources to offer, should I had changed my mind. All they care about was me giving birth, no plans besides that. Oh, except they could offer used baby clothes. Thanks? Lord, the deception of those places, plus the deception of your 35-year-old partner with a child older than you, plus the deception of your father. Most would have trouble functioning after that. I'm sorry for all that you went through, without support. The thing that makes events even harder is when you go through them without support. I hope you have supportive people in your life today. I agree. Those places, quote-unquote crisis pregnancy centers, are evil. They prey on women and girls who are usually scared and in a vulnerable position. Hence the quote-unquote crisis in their very name. And they use false pretenses to get them to come in so they can force their own agenda down these women's throats and try to drive their points home with misleading and straight up false quote-unquote medical information, along with manipulative guilting trip tactics like sending women home with donated baby clothes. Sadly, pregnancy crisis centers, CPCs, are still very much up and running even today. If anything, they are more prevalent now than ever. Sometimes they even open up right next door or down the street from actual abortion clinics to confuse patients who are trying to find the real clinic. I believe most CPCs also get federal funding, which is denied to actual clinics. If one has to go to that level of deception when trying to make a point, then in my opinion, their views shouldn't be taken seriously. Hopefully, one day these awful places will be illegal to run. Until then, I always share info about them, when appropriate, so that others can avoid having to be harassed and shamed while simply trying to exercise their right to be in control of their own body. Wishing you all well. X. You're absolutely right. They made me feel like I was evil for wanting an abortion. The craziest part is that they never even suggested adoption, which I wound up doing. Like, what kind of quote-unquote help is that?